Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're going to take a look at UTHRED of Bebbanburg, which is from the board game The Last Kingdom, published by Gamelyn Games, who was very kind enough to sponsor me with this game so I could paint the figure. Now, UTHRED of Bebbanburg is a leader and he looks like this. As a leader card. I'm going to take inspiration from this leader as well as from a few pictures online when I'm painting this figure. And as always, we're starting with the base paint, following with some wash, and then some highlights and finishing touches. First of all, thank you to all of you who are supporting me on my channel for when you subscribe and like and share my videos. Thank you so much for that. And for all of you who are encountering me for the first time, this is a board game channel where I'm showing you how to paint small figures from board games mostly, and taking you through in a step-by-step process. So everyone can feel that they can learn how to paint this one without any fuss and without too much troubles. It's supposed to be fun painting, and that's why I'm painting. So first of all, we're going to paint his face and hands by putting some color on his, and I'm going to use a color called Contrast Darkoath Flesh. I'm going to give it a little bit of shake and applying it neat because this is a contrast paint, and therefore it acts as kind of like a shade and or a wash and a base color at the same time. So I'm going to put this one up here, and I'm going to put it up on his face right now. Now I have to say as well that I have primed this miniature using a grey primer, but you can use a white primer as well if you want to. And it's really a requirement for when you start painting, because you actually want the paint to stick to the model, because otherwise without a primer there's a risk that it doesn't. So we're covering the whole face like this, and as well don't forget his chin and neck, chin and throat. Putting a little bit more paint on his hands. If you don't want to paint the hands, you can leave it as well and paint them brown to simulate kind of a glove effect if you want to as well. And don't forget the hand inside the shield as well, here the shield arm. There you go. Nice and easy. There it looks. Now, I'm using quite a lot of inspiration from both the series, the TV series, as well as from the card art themselves. The card art doesn't offer that much, so it's a little bit tricky to paint really, but I'm going to try and do it anyways. For the boots, I'm going to close this lid so it doesn't spill all over. You can start by doing some red leather from Vallejo if you like, but if you want to speed up the process, I would really recommend this contrast paint called Snakebite leather from Citadel. Give it a good shake and apply it neat, just like I did with the face. And it gives a kind of like nice leathery feeling, and it saves us some time when we have to go to the next stage afterwards. Covering the whole thing and letting it really pool in all the recesses. As well as on the other side. I'm going to put my chair a little bit forward so I sit a bit more comfortably, and I'll do the same thing for the sword scabbard over here, also leather. If you accidentally touch his back, don't worry, we can fix that later on. And turn it around to the other side. Nice and easy. If you feel that you've missed a spot here or there, you can always come back to it later. It's not a problem. Like I'm doing here and here. I'm going to show it up to you so you can see what it looks like before I move on to the next stage. Okay, this is what it looks like this. Turn it around so you can see the back side as well as the scabbard. And you can see here, don't forget the side here of the scabbard, as well as the top. Now, the good thing with this one, it dries quite quickly, so we can also make sure that it doesn't pool on the flat surfaces. You want it to pool in the recesses instead. Okay, now his card art, has a lot of fur details here and here. And for those, I'm going to paint those first. Going to, of course, clean my brush in the meantime. And for the fur details, there's a number of options, but I prefer a kind of like lighter grey. And for that one, I've used Stomvermin Fur from Citadel. And I'm going to apply this one diluted with a little bit of water. So I'm going to put it out on my palette over here. And the reason why I'm diluting it is that I don't want all the details to be obscured by doing so. And something like this. Now, I'm switching to another brush. Make sure that I get all those details. And now I'm applying the Stomvermin Fur for all the fur details on the back as well as on the front. We'll start on the back here. We'll work ourselves down to the front. Don't forget the small details. And since it's diluted as well, it will also help with the drying process. Now we're moving up on the front, still on the back, as well as here on the sides here. And if you feel that I made a mistake or that this shouldn't be colored so because you follow the series for a while and you think that I'm really not doing him any favors here, please let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to learn from it because I am a hobby painter. I paint to create a kind of like a tabletop standard, and your models will not win you any competitions, but it will look good on the table. Over here as well, there's some fur over here. That's how I interpret it on the top. So I'm going to cover this one with the same one as well. Something like this. Going on a bit to the other side. Something like that. For the main armor, I'm going to use another color. And cleaning my brush thoroughly, making sure that it's fully clean. I'm going to use a color called Dark Reaper from Citadel, because I want it to be a little bit of a dark blue, greyish hue. Putting back, so I'll also put and dilute this one with a little bit of water. Cleaning my brush thoroughly before I mix the paint. And about 50% water would be sufficient for this one. Now, this one covers all the armor parts. Just these ones underneath here. And you can see the water, and the color is very fluid right now because I've used it with quite a bit of water. And it also brings out all those nice details from the armor. If you feel that it's too fluid, you can move it around a little bit, and you can wait until it dries, or you can add in a little bit more paint, which I'm going to do right now. Don't forget the upper armor as well. And I'm actually actively painting over all the... Oh, that was my watch. Let me to get up, move up around a little bit. I'm moving out over all the upper part as well. I will fill in the details later. Turning it around. looking like this on the inside. Don't forget his armor on covering his thighs. As well as his armor coming up over here. As well as underneath the arm over here. And a little bit on the shield arm as well. Hopefully you can see this. Here it's getting a bit fluid, so I'm moving the paint around. Alright, something like this. Now for some straps and scabbards, I'm also going to use some Mournfang brown here. You use XV88 from Citadel as well. And with this color, I'm also going to paint his scabbard on the inside here of his knife. Can be a little bit tricky to get hold to. And I'm also going to cover his leather clothes underneath here as well. Oops. Something like this would be, going to see if I can move the camera a little bit. There you go. I'm also going to cover some of his straps over here. I'm using a very light toned down Mournfang brown here. Not a lot of paint on my brush at all, to appear for a very light cover. Same thing for the inside here as well. Inside of the shield. That's that. For the straps and belts and stuff like that, I'm using Skrag brown from Citadel as well. There's a strap coming around over here that I want to paint. There we go. I see that I missed up here some fur, which I'm going to cover right now. A little bit too much. And I'm giving it, and while I'm doing that, I'm also giving another layer of the fur as well here as well. Giving another look. Something like this. And as the blue paint has already darkened a little bit, so I'm going to cover over and giving it another layer over here as well. Completing the first one. And you can give this one 2 or 3 layers if you like. Something like this. For the metal part, I'm going to wait for that for a little while, but there is a small strap that I missed, so I'm going to cover this one and put this one down for a second, and with some more Skrag brown, I'll see if I can get hold of it. It's in the inside here, it's quite difficult to see, but it's on the inside of the figure. And there you go. For the hair, UTHRED's hair is quite dark, and therefore, and it's dark brown, almost dark brown blackish. So I'm going to use some Dryad bark for his hair. I'm using it neat to paint the hair. And he has long hair as well, so I assume the side of the hair here is actually his part of the hair here. And I'll try not to cover his face here with this one. If I do, I can cover it up later on with a dry brush. Trying to get the inside of the model is quite important because the hair is really one of his signatures on the figure. To get it good is a good idea to actually start doing that. So it's starting to look quite okay in the meantime. Quite okay in general. Looking something like this. Now, of course, you're probably wondering about the shield and the sword. For the sword, you can paint it mix of German dark grey and some metal. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and see if I can get it good looking just with metal. So I'm using some natural steel from Vallejo. You can also use oily steel if you like. If you want a darker tone, you can use a mix of black and oily steel or natural steel. Don't forget the sword guard here, as well as in the inside there's a little bit of a belt buckle, like a buckle here as well, also made of metal. And the inside as well can be a bit tricky, but with the right bit of angling you'll get the hang of it. The sword is a kind of a focal point of the figure, miniature, so taking great time to actually get great care getting it right can actually do some really nice tricks. Alright, the back of the sword, the hilt of the sword, I'm going to leave for now, but for the shield can be a little bit tricky because it is not really featured in the on the card art. So I took some liberty in researching that online, and he's wearing quite a few shields throughout the series as well. For this one I'm going to use some dark Incubi darkness from Citadel, and I'm going to show you where to put it around the sides of the shield. And using a small brush, this one is quite useful right now. And I'm using this one, and it's quite tricky for me as well, for this one here, this side here, this part here, all around it. And moving around with it like this in one single motion, instead of doing several brush strokes, is actually helpful. You'll get the hang of it quite soon, I believe. I believe in you. I do believe in you. Something like this. I missed the spot over here. That's not a problem. Now we're going to go into the middle parts. The middle parts, oops, looks like I dropped the brush, happens. Middle parts is a little bit tricky colour to use. I'm going to use a colour called Vallejo's red here. It's quite thick red, so I'm not really sure about it. You can alternatively use corn red from Vallejo, from Citadel. As you can see here, it's also quite nice, a nice vibrant colour. So for this one, I'm going to use it on all the inner parts except for the shield boss. And you want to make sure you use a fine tip brush such as 0 or a double 0 brush. It can be quite tricky to get hang of it, but if you work yourself out from the center and taking great care not to touch any of the other parts, you'll get the hang of it. And then after you've done the quarters or the fifths, then you can start filling it in as you go. I may get this entirely wrong. And it's very likely that I will. So if you know that I make a mistake, let me know in the comments. Using a small sliver of paint is more useful than blobbing on with more. Here I added a little bit more by mistake. Here I'm adding more and more. I'm going to zoom in a second. It looks like this. Nothing much to look at in general, but in the meantime, while it dries, because it needs to be completely dry, we can paint the back side of the shield. And for this one, I'm going to use a colour called, another contrast colour, called Contrast Wyldwood. And give it a nice shake, because it's just going to be dark brown. It's a nice colour if you want to have brown details. And it saves quite a bit of time when it comes to a wash later on as well. I'm going to put this one down, put some more paint in my brush. You cover the whole part. You can do the individual straps inside of it later on as well. You can angle this one here so you can see it. And of course you don't want it to be pooling too much So you can easily take up damp brush, soak up the paint, and it looks like this on the back side. Got some paint here on the side here, doesn't matter, I can fix this later on as we go. Most important is that the red here gets a fair chance to dry. While we do so, we also look around the figure, have we missed any spots? It's a good opportunity to do so. And you can see how I missed it a little bit of the arm here, which I'm going to do in some Mournfang brown. Also gives me an opportunity to cover the other Mournfang brown in here, which was a little bit too light. As well as on the other side of the figure here on his arm. And then the other side here. Now, his sword hilt, I'm going to come back to that now as it dries. And I'm going to paint the sword hilt with the same contrast Wyldwood as we did before, but not the stone in the back. I have some other plans for that. Alternatively, you can also use some Gawthor brown or some Dryad bark from Citadel if you like. Alright, shield's looking quite okay. Clean the brush, closing all the lids on all the paint pots so it doesn't spill out. Here we had one that telling me again to take a walk. And now we have this one almost entirely dry, and it has some lighter layers on the top and front, so I'm going to use some Rakarth flesh from Citadel, giving it a good shake. You can also use Karak stone potentially from Citadel. I'm using it neat. Not really sure about it, but I'm going to try to keep it as close as possible to the card art. And I'm covering the front here, as well as all the sides, the things here, the ring here around it with this color. UTHRED used a variety of shields in Last Kingdom series. Here I'm also covering this one, so it kind of like forms a cross, which is kind of also a little bit ironic, because UTHRED wasn't portrayed as a Christian in the series, as well as these beams over here, as well as the front here. I know it's not perfect. I'm going to see if I can make some adjustments later on with the red. Looking like this. Looks a little bit better than the table at least. And for the other ones around it, I'm going to use, it was normally some kind of sheep, some kind of hide around it. So I'm going to return to using some, what was it? Yep, there you go. Some Snakebite leather for the trim of the shield. We'll see how that pans out. Taking care not to touch anything else here. looking quite okay, if I may say so. Only quite. And we are coming towards the end of the base paints. Now, with this one, I'm going to now see if I can correct some of the mistakes I made here with the red to make sure that I get it all correctly. We'll see if I can get it into camera this time as well. I can say it openly, I'm very, very bad at painting these small details myself. But it looks quite okay. Now we also need to paint the shield boss. And of course that's also going to be painted in natural steel from Vallejo, which we did before from the sword. Give it a nice grey tone. And also allows it to paint over the mistakes from the red that we did previously. Alright, looks quite okay now. Of course you're wondering what about the amber amulet or amber stone on his sword over here. So I'm going to use some sun yellow for this one from Vallejo. I want it to be really bright and like really shining. So and as you can see here, it's way too shiny as it is, and there's going to be a fix for that as well. Looks like this. We are ready for the first wash here, but before that we're going to paint the stone over here, and with the stone we are going to cover it in a colour called Mechanicus Standard Grey, because he is actually standing on a rock and it'd be a shame to actually miss that before we go into the wash. And covering it straight with some Mechanicus Standard Grey neat from Citadel. Yep, and there we go. Now, if you want to, you can leave the miniature just like this, and it will be looking quite okay on the tabletop. But if you want to add some more details, you should definitely continue watching and paint with me for the next stage. I'm going to make sure that I find my washes, which I did over there, and now we're going to apply only a light wash for this one. We're going to start with the fur details as well as the sword, and painting it with some black wash from Vallejo. However, you can, if you want to, definitely use Nuln Oil for this one as well. I'm using it all neat and applying it on all the fur details to really bring out those nice details. So all the fur details we covered in the past, we'll do this one we cover these ones with some black wash. We also cover the sword. Giving it both sides, under and above, a nice darker feel for it. Now, of course, the shield boss. Giving it a lighter. Now, I'm also going to touch up a little bit on the sides here, the shield here itself, with some dark wash, to really give it a bit more contrast for the rest of the shield. Giving it a worn, almost dirty look. Looking like this. Now, you're probably wondering what to do about all the leathery parts that we did. Once this one is dry as well, which is not entirely, we can paint the stone with this black wash as well. However, we are moving on to the armor parts, which is kind of like one of the focal parts of the miniature. And for that, let's see if I have that. I should have it. Yes. So for that, my arm is coming in. And we have some Drakenhof Nightshade for that, from Citadel. So we're covering this one. Really bringing out the nice detailed armor for this one. There we go. It's looking quite okay already. All the brown parts, I'm leaving them as they are, but you can apply some Agrax Earthshade if you like to them. Now, for the amber part, I want to make sure it looks a little bit more like amber, so I'm applying a shade called Casandora Yellow from Citadel on top of this one. It darkens it, and you want it to pull on the surfaces here actually. Give it a more of an amber feel. So normally don't pull on the surface, but in this case you do. You really want it to pull on the surface. Now, when this one is almost dried, I'm leaving the hair as it is as well. You can put some Agrax Earthshade if you like on this one, but I'm quite pleased with this as it is. But for the face now, which needs a little bit more work, I believe, I'm going to apply some flat flesh from Vallejo in a tiny dry brush over the face. Putting it out here on not on my palette because it spilled a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. Putting it down over here. I'm using an old brush for this one. So if you have an old brush, that will be very preferable to use. Let's see if I can take an old brush for this one. An old brush like this one will be fine. Take this one, wipe it across a piece of pipe paper until pretty much all the paint is done and gone, and brush it carefully over his face, lightening it up only a little bit to bring out those beautiful facial details that really makes the figure pop. Something like this. If you want to, you can paint eye details as well if you want to. I'm not going to bother with this one. I'm not very good at that as well. As well as the hands here can also be a nice focal point of the miniature, as well as inside here as well. Something like this. Now we're done with the facial features, and now on to the shield. Shield, which I'm dreading to paint again because I am not very good at it. Again, we're going back to the Rakarth flesh part, and we're going to see if we can cover out some more details with it now when we have some wash on top of it. So this one, now it's a good opportunity to paint in these lines here. These lines as well, making sure it looks very similar to a cross, and make sure that you don't, and of course the top as well if you've accidentally spilled over some other paint on top of it. Now that's that. Shield is looking quite okay. Now I'm also going to apply some red paint to it as well, and this is a nice detail that many people miss. It has these kind of like little dots in here are also red painted. So if you can get the hang of it, just put a small dot of paint into each one of them. It really makes the shield stand out. Don't need much, just a tiny dot of paint in each of them with a brush. Looking like this. Not very good at this. Now, of course, you can apply some other red parts to the paint here as well, making sure that it looks better. Looking quite okay. Let's see if I can zoom in for you. There you go. Now, with the shield mostly done, I'm going to paint a slightly sliver on this other outside of the paint with some Incubi darkness as well. Trying to go for a whole wheel around like this. It doesn't matter if the shield is not perfect. If you wanted to have kind of like the battle scarred look or the worn look, but I will cover some parts right now with some steel, and for that steel I'm going to use a highlight steel, because now we're in the highlight stage, called Chainmail Silver for all the shield parts. You can skip this part if you wanted the sword and the shield to have more of a worn look, but for the sword I want only the edges to look like this, so you can really see the middle here and the edge here coming out. Here I want to give a tiny bit in the center here, kind of like a polished look, as well as the center of his things here. I'm going to come back to Chainmail Silver in a bit, but now we're also going to apply some highlights to his fur and his armor. And his fur, I'm going to apply some Stomvermin Fur neat to it as a small highlight. On the top here as well, leaving some darker parts in the recesses. Because this is where the sun shines and you want it to be a little bit lighter. If you've missed some parts here from the beginning, it's a good opportunity to cover it as well. Now, painting this one as well, in case he has some fur there. Now, for the armor part, this bluish armor part, I'm going to again apply some Dark Reaper to it from Citadel. Now I'm going to try to take out, now I'm applying it neat. And I really want to make sure that I cover only the raised areas here. There are some bands looking up, as well as in between these nuts and bolts as well. As well as the front. Front, you can be more liberal over it and covering most of the area in case, because it's not going to show that much on the miniature. Here you go. And finally, we are going to apply the final highlight of the armor here using some Chainmail Silver. This one from Citadel, from Vallejo. My apologies. And you really want to just cover the kind of like bolts and like studs of the armor here. Can really be a nice focal point for the miniature. Have these studded look here. And there you have it. UTHRED of Bebbanburg is now complete, in my opinion. If you think that anything else should have been added, I appreciate you telling me in the comments. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the channel. Thank you very much and have a lovely day. By the way, also don't forget to put some varnish on the miniature once you're done with it, and put some basing on it as well for make sure that it can be handled more and more. Again, thank you so much to Gamelyn Games for sponsoring me with Last Kingdom board game. Check out the link in the description box below where you can actually find the game. And thanks for watching. Put this one here.